If you're watching this right now, at this exact moment, I want you to know something. This is not random. This is not a chance. You didn't stumble here by accident while scrolling through an endless stream of distractions. Something inside you, something you might not even fully understand yet, brought you here. And I'm Benjamin Franklin, and I've been waiting a very long time to tell you this. You see, I've watched from beyond the veil of time as generation after generation struggles with the same things I struggled with. The same doubts, the same fears, the same burning questions about whether their life matters, whether they're wasting their precious days, and whether they're destined for something more. And right now, you're sitting there, maybe in your room, maybe on a break from work, maybe lying in bed unable to sleep because something in your soul is restless. Something is calling to you. I died over 200 years ago, but the truths I discovered don't die. They can't die, because they're not really mine. They belong to the universe, to the great pattern of human awakening that repeats itself across centuries. And you, right now, you're part of that pattern. You're standing at a threshold, even if you don't realize it yet. On one side is the life you've been living, the safe routines, the comfortable numbness, the quiet desperation that you've maybe learned to ignore. On the other side is something else entirely, something that terrifies you and excites you at the same time. I was 17 years old when I ran away from my brother's print shop in Boston. I had no money, no connections, no safety net. I walked through the streets of Philadelphia with 3 puffy rolls under my arms, looking like an absolute fool. People laughed at me, and in that moment, I made a choice that would define everything that came after. I chose to stop waiting for permission to become who I was meant to be. That's why you're here. Not to hear me brag about flying kites in thunderstorms or signing declarations. You're here because somewhere inside you, there's a whisper that won't go quiet. A whisper that says you're capable of more, that your life could mean something, that you're not crazy for wanting to break free from whatever cage you've been living in. So let me be direct with you. What I'm about to share is going to challenge everything you think you know about success, about happiness, about what it means to live a life that matters. This isn't going to be comfortable. Real transformation never is. But if you stay with me, if you really hear what I'm saying, I promise you this: you will never see your life the same way again. And that's exactly what you need right now. No more information. No more motivation that fades by tomorrow. But a fundamental shift in how you see yourself and your place in this world. I didn't achieve what I achieved because I was special. I achieved it because I understood something that most people never learn. And in the next hour, I'm going to break that down for you piece by piece, story by story, until it clicks. Until you see it. Until you can't unsee it. Are you ready? Because once we start this journey together, there's no going back to comfortable ignorance. There's only forward, into the truth of who you really are. Let's begin. You know what I've noticed about people? They think they want success. They think they want wealth or fame or recognition. But that's not what they really want. What they really want is permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to stop living someone else's version of their life. Permission to finally become themselves. And nobody's going to give you that permission. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you differently. But the people around you, they're too invested in who you are right now. Your family has expectations. Your friends need you to stay at their level. Society has a box with your name on it, and the world runs smoothly when everyone stays in their box. I learned this the hard way. When I was young, I worked for my brother James at his printing shop. He was older, he was in charge, and I was supposed to be grateful. Grateful for the opportunity. Grateful for the roof over my head. Grateful to be taught a trade. But here's what nobody tells you about gratitude. Sometimes it's just another word for chains. I had ideas. I had opinions. I wanted to write, to create, to contribute something meaningful to the world. But every time I tried, my brother would shut me down. You're too young, he'd say. You don't know enough. Stay in your lane. Do your work, and be grateful. So I did something radical. I started writing essays under a fake name. I called myself Silence Dogood. I would slide these essays under the print shop door at night, and in the morning, my brother would find them and publish them. And people loved them. They talked about them all over Boston. These essays are from this wise, witty widow who had such insight into human nature. And my brother had no idea it was me, his own apprentice, the kid he thought didn't know anything. I was 16 years old. Do you see what happened there? I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait until I was qualified or ready. I didn't wait for someone to anoint me as worthy. I permitted myself, and that changed everything. But here's the part that really matters. When I finally revealed that I was Silence Dogood, do you know what happened? My brother was furious, humiliated. He felt tricked, and instead of being proud, instead of recognizing my talent, he made my life hell. He beat me. He sabotaged me. He did everything he could to keep me small. And that's when I understood something crucial about human nature. The people closest to you will often fight the hardest against your transformation, not because they're evil, but because your growth threatens their understanding of the world. If you can change, if you can break free, then what does that say about their choices? About their compromises? About the dreams they gave up on? Your transformation is a mirror, and not everyone wants to see their reflection. So, I left. In the middle of the night, I broke my apprenticeship contract, which was basically illegal, and I ran. I had nothing. I knew no one. I was a teenage runaway in a world where reputation was everything, and I just destroyed mine. I arrived in Philadelphia with literally 3 pennies in my pocket. I was dirty, exhausted, and terrified. I bought those 3 rolls of bread because I was starving, and I carried them through the streets because I had nowhere else to put them. And a girl named Deborah Reed saw me from her doorway and laughed at how ridiculous I looked. I must have looked like the biggest failure in the world. And you know what? I was free. For the first time in my life, I was completely, terrifyingly free. That's the first thing I need you to understand. Freedom doesn't look like success. Not at first. Freedom looks like chaos. It looks like starting over. It looks like losing everything that made you feel safe, so you can build something real. And most people never take that step. They stay in the print shop with their brother. They stay in the relationship that's killing them slowly. They stay in the job that numbs their soul. They stay in life that looks good from the outside, while they die inside. Because freedom requires something most people won't give. It requires you to disappoint people. It requires you to look foolish. It requires you to trust yourself more than you trust the chorus of voices telling you to play it safe. So let me ask you directly. What's your print shop? What's the thing you know you need to leave, but you're terrified to walk away from? What's the comfortable cage that's keeping you small? Don't answer too quickly. Really think about it, because I guarantee you, there's always something. Some compromise you've made, some dream you've shelved, some version of yourself you've buried to keep the peace. And I'm here to tell you that thing you're tolerating, it's killing you. Slowly, quietly, day by day. And you've gotten so used to the weight of it that you don't even notice anymore. But it's there. And deep down, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you to blow up your life tomorrow. I'm not telling you to quit your job and move to another city and burn every bridge. That's not wisdom. That's panic. And I learned the difference the hard way. What I am telling you is this. You cannot build an extraordinary life on a foundation of lies. And every day you pretend to be smaller than you are. Every day you silence your own voice. Every day you choose comfort over truth. You're building on sand. And eventually, inevitably, it all comes crashing down. Better to start building on rock now. Better to face the discomfort of transformation when you choose it, than to face the devastation of collapse when life chooses it for you. When I got to Philadelphia, I had to rebuild from nothing. And that was the greatest gift I could have given myself. Because for the first time, I got to choose. I got to decide who Benjamin Franklin was going to be. Not who my family wanted. Not who society expected. Who I actually was. I found work at a print shop, saved every penny, and read every book I could get my hands on. I started a club called the Junto, where a group of us would meet every week to discuss ideas, to challenge each other, to grow together. I created a lending library, so knowledge wouldn't just be for the wealthy. I published Poor Richard's Almanac, where I could share wisdom and humor and insight with common people who couldn't afford fancy books. And none of this was the plan. I didn't have a master strategy. I just kept asking myself one question. What would someone who respected themselves do next? Not what would impress people. Not what would make the most money. Not what was safest. What would someone who actually respected themselves, who believed they had something valuable to contribute, what would that person do? And that question changed everything. Because when you respect yourself, you make different choices. You set boundaries. You invest in your growth. You speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. You try things that might fail, because the alternative is never trying at all. Most people don't respect themselves. They might say they do. They might think they do. But their actions tell a different story. They let people walk all over them. They abandon their goals at the first sign of difficulty. They numb themselves with distractions instead of facing their pain. They live for everyone else's approval while ignoring the one voice that matters most, the one inside them that knows what's true. I spent my whole life studying human nature. I watched people in taverns and market squares, in government halls and intellectual salons. And I discovered something that most people never realize. The external world, all the success and failure and drama and achievement, it's just a reflection of the internal world. What's happening inside you is what creates what happens around you. If you don't believe you deserve success, you'll sabotage every opportunity. If you don't believe you're worthy of love, you'll push away anyone who gets too close. If you don't believe you have something valuable to contribute, you'll stay silent while lesser voices dominate the conversation. Your beliefs about yourself are creating your reality. Not sometimes. Not occasionally. Always. Every single day. And the beautiful, terrifying truth is this. You can change those beliefs. Right now. Today. This moment. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need to wait until you have more money or more time or more confidence. You just need to decide. I invented the lightning rod, bifocals, and the Franklin stove. I helped found a nation. I negotiated treaties with France. I mapped the Gulf Stream. I conducted groundbreaking research on electricity. And you know what the secret was? I decided I was the kind of person who could do those things. And then I acted like that person. Until it was true. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. There's a massive difference. Arrogance says, I'm better than you. Self-respect says, I'm not going to pretend to be less than I am to make you comfortable. Arrogance needs external validation. Self-respect generates internal validation. Arrogance is brittle and defensive. Self-respect is solid and secure. And here's what I need you to understand. Self-respect is a choice. It's not something you're born with. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you cultivate deliberately through your daily actions. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build self-respect. Every time you do the hard thing, instead of the easy thing, you build self-respect. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you build self-respect. And every time you break a promise to yourself, you erode it. Every time you take the easy path, you erode it. Every time you lie to yourself about what you really want or who you really are, you erode it. So, let me ask you this. What promises have you been breaking to yourself? What commitments have you abandoned? What truths have you been avoiding because they demand too much of you? Write them down. Every single one. Because here's what I learned in my 70 years walking this earth. The cost of a lie isn't what it does to others. The real cost is what it does to you. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you're teaching yourself that you can't be trusted. You're training yourself to doubt your own word. And a man who can't trust himself cannot build anything of lasting value. I used to keep what I called my book of resolutions. Every week, I would mark down whether I had kept my commitments to myself. Not commitments to others, those are easy, because shame keeps us accountable. No, I tracked the promises I made when no one else was watching. The commitment to rise at 5. The promise to write for 2 hours. The resolution to speak only what was useful, necessary, or kind. And let me tell you, that book humbled me more than any critic ever could. There were weeks where I failed spectacularly. I looked at that page and saw nothing but my own weakness staring back at me. But I didn't hide from it. I didn't make excuses. I simply observed it, acknowledged it, and began again the next day. Because that's the practice. Not perfection. Not some impossible standard of never failing. But the simple, humble practice of seeing yourself clearly and choosing differently. You want to know the real revolution? It's not throwing off some external oppressor. It's throwing off the tyranny of your own self-deception. It's the moment you stop performing for an imaginary audience and start living in alignment with what you actually believe. And yes, it's uncomfortable. God, uncomfortable. Because once you start seeing clearly, you can't unsee it. Once you start telling yourself the truth, the lies become unbearable. Your own excuses start to sound hollow, even to your own ears. But that discomfort? That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. That's a sign you're finally doing something right. That friction you feel is your false self dying and your true self being born. And birth, my friend, has never been a comfortable process. So let me ask you directly, are you ready to stop lying to yourself? Not tomorrow. Not after you've prepared. Right now, are you ready to look at your life with clear eyes and call things by their true names? Good. Because the first thing we need to identify is this. What are you holding on to that's already dead? I don't mean physically. I mean the dreams that have curdled into obligations, the relationships that became transactions, the version of yourself you keep defending, even though you've outgrown it years ago. When I was a young printer, I formed a club. We called it the Junto. Every Friday night, a dozen of us would gather to discuss philosophy, morals, and politics. We challenged each other. We grew together. It was glorious. But after a few years, something shifted. Some members stopped preparing. Others came only to argue, not to learn. The spirit that made it vital began to fade. And I had a choice: keep the club alive in name only, or let it transform into something new. I chose transformation. And the Junto became the seed for the American Philosophical Society, which exists to this day. But here's what I learned. The hardest part wasn't ending what wasn't working. It was admitting that something I'd created, something I'd invested in, had run its course. My ego wanted to preserve it. My wisdom knew better. You're carrying dead weight right now, I guarantee it. Maybe it's a career path you chose at 22 that doesn't fit who you are at 35. Maybe it's a friendship that once nourished you but now drains you. Maybe it's an image of who you're supposed to be that you're exhausted from maintaining. And you know what the cruelest part is? You've convinced yourself that letting go would be failure. That pivoting would mean admitting you were wrong. That changing your mind would disappoint people. Let me tell you something about disappointment. The people worth keeping in your life want you to grow, even if that growth takes you in unexpected directions. The ones who need you to stay small, they're anchors, not allies. I changed my mind constantly. I was a printer, then a scientist, then a diplomat, then a revolutionary. I abandoned projects that weren't working. I revised opinions when evidence demanded it. And you know what nobody remembers? The things I quit. They remember what I built instead. So let's do this together. Right now, name one thing you're holding on to, purely out of stubbornness or fear. One commitment that's become a chain. One identity that no longer serves you. Say it out loud if you're alone. Write it down if you need to. Acknowledge it. Because here's the truth about dead weight. It doesn't just slow you down. It actively prevents you from seeing new opportunities. When you're stretched thin trying to maintain things that don't serve you, you develop tunnel vision. You become so focused on managing what you have that you miss what you could have. I saw this pattern repeatedly in my diplomatic work. Diplomats who clung to outdated alliances found themselves blindsided when the political landscape shifted. They were so busy maintaining connections that had lost their relevance that they completely missed emerging opportunities with new powers. Meanwhile, the successful diplomats were the ones who periodically assessed their networks. They weren't afraid to let certain relationships naturally fade when they no longer served mutual interests. This freed them to invest time and energy into new alliances that actually mattered for the future. The same principle applies to your personal life. That hobby you force yourself to maintain because you've already invested money and equipment, it's not just wasting your time. It's preventing you from discovering the passion that might actually energize you. That subscription you keep paying for but never use, it's not just $15 a month. It's mental clutter. Every time you see that charge on your credit card statement, there's a tiny moment of guilt, a small reminder of waste. These micro-stresses accumulate. Here's what most people don't realize about dead weight. It compounds. One unnecessary commitment makes it easier to take on another. One unused possession makes it easier to acquire more. Before you know it, you're living a life that's 60% obligation and only 40% intention. And the truly insidious part? Dead weight makes you feel busy. It gives you the illusion of productivity. You tell yourself, I can't possibly take on anything new, look how full my schedule is. But when you examine that schedule honestly, how much of it is actually moving you forward versus just keeping you treading water? I learned this lesson painfully during my years managing the postal system. I initially tried to preserve every route, every procedure that had been established. I thought I was being thorough, responsible. In reality, I was being a coward. I was afraid to make the difficult decisions about what needed to go. It wasn't until I finally conducted a ruthless audit examining which routes were actually efficient, which procedures actually served their purpose, that the system began to improve. And you know what happened when I cut the dead weight? The entire operation became clearer. Problems that had seemed complicated suddenly had obvious solutions because they were no longer buried under layers of unnecessary complexity. I started making faster progress on every project because I wasn't constantly being interrupted by people who needed validation rather than collaboration. The quality of my work improved because I was surrounding myself with people who challenged me to be better, not people who affirmed my mediocrity. Here's something nobody tells you about simplicity. It's not about having less. It's about having exactly what you need and nothing that distracts from it. A simple machine isn't weak, it's efficient. Every part serves a purpose. There's no wasted motion, no friction from components working against each other. Your life should operate the same way. Every commitment should serve your primary objectives. Every relationship should add value. And I don't mean transactional value. I mean it should make you better, or happier, or more capable. Every possession should either be useful or bring you genuine joy, not just fill space to make you feel successful. I applied this ruthlessly to my daily routine. I looked at how I spent each hour and asked, does this move me toward my goals? Or is this just activity disguised as productivity? Because let me tell you, there's a massive difference between being busy and being effective. Being busy is attending every meeting you're invited to. Being effective is declining meetings where your presence adds no value and your time could be better spent elsewhere. Being busy is responding to every email within 5 minutes. Being effective is batching communications and responding thoughtfully rather than reactively. Being busy is saying yes to every opportunity that comes your way. Being effective is saying no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great ones. I started tracking my time for 1 week. Not obsessively, just honestly. Where did my hours actually go? The results shocked me. I was spending nearly 20 hours a week on activities that I couldn't even remember by Friday. Meetings that accomplished nothing. Social obligations that drained rather than energized me. Scrolling through feeds that made me feel informed, but actually just made me anxious and distracted. 20 hours. That's half a work week. Vanished into activities that added nothing to my life. So I cut them. Not gradually, immediately. I unsubscribed from everything that wasn't essential. I declined standing meetings that had become a habit rather than a necessity. I stopped attending events just because I felt obligated. The pushback was immediate. People questioned my commitment. They said I was being antisocial, that I was losing touch, that I was making a mistake. But you know what I gained? I gained my life back. I gained clarity. I gained energy. I gained focus. I gained time, not just minutes and hours, but actual, meaningful time where I wasn't performing for an invisible audience or measuring my worth in double taps and comment counts. And here's what really struck me. The people who truly mattered, they were still there. My real friends didn't vanish when I stopped posting. They texted. They called. They showed up at my door. Because genuine relationships don't need a like button to sustain them. They need presence. They need effort. They need you to actually be there. Not just digitally check in with a heart emoji. The shallow connections? Yeah, those faded. The people who only interacted with my curated highlight reel but never asked how I was really doing, they drifted away. And you know what? That wasn't a loss. That was pruning. That was removing dead weight I didn't even know I was carrying. I started noticing things I'd stopped seeing. The way morning light hits the kitchen counter, the actual taste of my coffee, instead of just photographing it. The feeling of finishing a book without once thinking about how to caption it. Small things, maybe. But small things become your life when you add them up. I remembered what boredom felt like, real boredom, not the compulsive scroll to fill the void kind. And boredom, it turns out, is where creativity lives. When your brain isn't constantly being fed content, it starts making its own. Ideas bubble up, connections form. You actually think your own thoughts instead of remixing everyone else's. The anxiety didn't disappear overnight. I won't lie to you. There were moments I felt phantom vibrations, reached for a phone that wasn't there, and wondered what I was missing. The FOMO was real. But here's the thing about FOMO, it's based on a lie. You're not actually missing out. You're opting out of a system designed to make you feel inadequate. Let me tell you what you're really missing out on when you chase every opportunity. Depth mastery. The kind of profound understanding that only comes from sustained focus. Think about it. Every time you switch gears, you're not just changing direction, you're paying a switching cost. Your brain has to recalibrate, your momentum dies, and you start over at square one with something new. Convincing yourself this times is the thing that'll finally work. I learned this the hard way. In my 20s, I tried to be everywhere, do everything. I printed currency, ran a newspaper, organized civic groups, and conducted scientific experiments, all while managing multiple business ventures. Sounds impressive, right? But here's what nobody tells you. I was exhausted, scattered. Making progress everywhere meant making real times, progress nowhere. It wasn't until I learned to say no, to consolidate, to focus, that my actual contributions began to matter. The people who change the world aren't the ones doing everything. They're the ones doing one thing, with such intensity and dedication that they transform it completely. You want to know the real secret? Subtraction is more powerful than addition. Every yes you give costs you 100 potential deeper yeses to what truly matters. When you remove the noise, when you deliberately choose to miss out on the mediocre opportunities, you create space for the extraordinary ones. I'm not telling you to become a hermit or ignore all new possibilities. I'm telling you to be strategic. To understand that your attention is not just limited, it's your most valuable asset. More valuable than your time, because you can waste time and recover. But attention, once it's fragmented, it's gone. The modern world doesn't just want your attention. It wants to train you, to need the stimulation, to feel anxious when you're not checking, scrolling, chasing. But you can break that training. Let me tell you how to begin. Start with just 5 minutes. Not an hour, not a morning, 5 minutes, where you sit and do absolutely nothing. No phone, no book, no task, just you and your thoughts. And here's what will happen. You'll feel uncomfortable. Your mind will race. You'll think of 17 things you should be doing. You'll feel an almost physical pull toward distraction. That discomfort? That's not a sign that something's wrong. That's the sound of the chains rattling. That's your mind realizing it might not be a slave anymore. I practiced this with writing. In my day, when I sat down with paper and ink, I had to be there. There was no quick check of the mail coach schedule. No glancing at the latest broadsheet between sentences. The slowness of the medium forced the presence. And in that presence, I found clarity. You need to recreate that friction artificially, because your world has engineered it all away. Delete the apps that devour your time. Yes, delete them. Not hide them in a folder. Delete. Make it hard to access them. Every barrier you place between impulse and action is a moment where your true self can wake up and ask, do I actually want this? Or is this just my trained response? I knew a printer once who kept his rum locked in a cabinet and gave the key to his wife. Not because he couldn't break the cabinet, he could, but because that small barrier gave him space to choose. Most nights, he chose not to ask for the key. The friction saved him. Create physical barriers. Charge your phone in another room at night. Use an actual alarm clock. Yes, they still exist. When you work on something important, put your phone somewhere you'd have to physically stand up and walk to reach it. This sounds absurdly simple. It is. It also works. Let me tell you what happened next. I began tracking my time like a merchant tracks his ledger. Every day, I wrote down how I spent each hour, not to punish myself, not to become some obsessive automaton, but to see the truth. And the truth was uncomfortable. I thought I was a hard worker. I prided myself on my industry. But the numbers revealed a different story. 3 hours lost to aimless conversation. 2 hours drifting through tasks without real focus. Another hour to errands that could have waited or been batched together. When you measure something, it changes. This is a law of human nature. The moment you start recording your time, you become aware of it. And awareness is the first step toward mastery. I discovered I had far more time than I believed. The problem was not scarcity. It was a waste. It was a leakage. Small holes that drained my days the way a cracked bucket loses water, drip by drip, until nothing remains. So I made adjustments. Small ones. I grouped similar tasks. I set specific hours for reading, writing, and business. I protected my mornings, when my mind was sharpest, from interruption and triviality. Within weeks, my output doubled. Not because I worked longer, because I worked with intention. This leads me to the second principle, one that most people miss entirely. Energy matters more than time. You can have 12 hours in a day, but if you spend them exhausted, distracted, or scattered, they produce nothing of value. One focused hour when your mind is sharp accomplishes more than 6 hours of depleted effort. I learned to protect my energy as fiercely as my time. I studied my own patterns. I noticed that when I was most alert, most creative, most capable of deep thinking, morning, always morning, before the world made its demands, before interruptions arrived. So, I restructured everything around this truth. My most important work happened early. Writing, planning, problem-solving, the work that required my best self. Afternoons were for meetings, correspondence, and routine matters, things I could handle even when my mental edge had dulled. This single shift transformed everything. But here's what caught me by surprise. Once I started protecting my mornings, I noticed something else. The quality of my afternoon work improved, too. When you've already accomplished your most important work by noon, everything after carries less anxiety. You're not carrying the weight of the crucial tasks. Your mind is clearer, even in its tired state. I remember one particularly demanding week where I had 3 major negotiations to complete, a scientific paper to finish, and 14 letters requiring thoughtful responses. Old Benjamin would have panicked, would have scattered his attention across all of it, making minimal progress everywhere while feeling perpetually behind. But with my morning system in place, I simply tackled one major item each morning. The negotiations got my sharpest thinking, one per day. The paper was completed across 2 morning sessions. The letters? Those were perfect afternoon work. By week's end, everything was done. Not frantically, not with last-minute compromises, but with steady, focused attention applied at the optimal time. The sense of calm this created was remarkable. I wasn't working more hours. If anything, I was working less. But I was working deliberately. The transformation wasn't just professional. My relationships improved. When you're constantly anxious about unfinished important work, you're never fully present with anyone. Every conversation carries the ghost of tasks waiting for you. But when you know your crucial work is already done, you can actually listen. You can be there with the person in front of you. My colleagues noticed. "You seem different," one told me. More settled somehow. I hadn't told anyone about my energy management system. It wasn't obvious from the outside. But the internal shift was profound, and apparently it showed. Here's the principle I want you to understand. Your energy is not democratic. Every hour is not created equal. Treating them as if they are is perhaps the most expensive mistake you can make with your time. Most people organize their days around external demands. Meetings get scheduled when others are available. Tasks get done based on deadlines or whoever asks loudest. Your own energy patterns never enter the equation. This is madness. It's like trying to sail without considering the wind, or plant crops without considering the seasons. So, what's the alternative? I learned something important during those years of tracking my own patterns. There are certain hours, I call them your power hours, when your mental clarity peaks, when complex problems become simple, when your willpower is strongest, not through force but through natural alignment. For me, this window opened early. Between 5 and 9 in the morning, my mind possessed a crystalline quality it never achieved later in the day. Ideas that seemed muddled at noon would arrange themselves with perfect logic at dawn. Difficult correspondence I'd struggled with in the afternoon would flow effortlessly from my pen before breakfast. Was this because mornings are universally superior? Absolutely not. I knew printers who came alive at midnight, whose best work emerged when the rest of Philadelphia slept. The point wasn't the specific hour, it was the recognition of a pattern. Here's what makes this powerful. When you identify these windows and protect them fiercely, you accomplish in 2 hours what might otherwise require 6. Not through superhuman effort, but through natural resonance with your own biology. Think about it. You've experienced this. There are times when you sit down to work, and everything flows. The words come easily. The solutions appear. You enter a state where time seems to disappear, and you emerge hours later with substantial progress. Then there are other times when every sentence is torture, when you rewrite the same paragraph 17 times, when you stare at problems that refuse to yield. We've been taught to attribute this to discipline, that the difference is merely our level of focus or commitment. But what if the primary variable isn't your effort but your timing? I tested this rigorously. I tracked, not just when I worked, but the quality of that work. I noticed my best writing happened before 9. My best social interactions, strangely, peaked around 4 in the afternoon. My strategic thinking, the big decisions about business or civic projects, crystallized best around 11 in the morning. Once I saw these patterns, I restructured everything. Important writing? Morning. Difficult negotiations? Late afternoon. Major decisions? Mid-morning. Routine tasks that required less cognitive power? The hours when my energy naturally dipped. The results weren't marginal, they were transformational. I wasn't working more hours. I was working the right hours for each type of task. Your biology isn't your enemy, it's your competitive advantage once you learn to read it. Let me share something that changed everything for me. I started keeping what I called my attention inventory. For 1 week, I tracked every hour, not what I times planned times to do, but what I times actually times did, and how it felt. No judgment, just observation. Like a scientist studying a fascinating creature that happened to be myself. The patterns that emerged were startling. Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, I could tackle complex problems that would have destroyed me on Monday. Late afternoons, perfect for those routine tasks. I'd been forcing myself to do first thing in the morning when my mind wanted to soar. Friday afternoons, forget strategic thinking, but ideal for clearing my inbox and organizing for next week. I discovered I had 3 distinct energy zones each day. The peak hours, usually 2 to 4 hours, where my mind felt sharp as a blade. The trough, that post-lunch dip where cognition slowed to a crawl. And the rebound, a secondary wave of energy that wasn't as intense as morning, but perfect for certain tasks. Most people fight through with caffeine and willpower. I learned to befriend it. I scheduled my calls then, my admin work, things that needed doing but didn't need genius. The results? Within 3 weeks, I'd completed projects I'd been dragging out for months. Not because I suddenly had more time. I had the same 24 hours everyone gets. But I'd stopped treating every hour as identical. A 9 a.m. hour and a 3 p.m. hour are not the same currency. One might buy you breakthrough thinking. The other might be best spent on maintenance work. Here's what shocked me. My actual productive hours didn't increase much. Maybe from 25 to 30 hours per week of real output. But the quality times of those hours transformed completely. I was finally working times with times my biology instead of against it. And that 5-hour difference, strategically placed, created more progress than my previous 50-hour grinds ever did. You know what nobody tells you? Your body has been trying to help you this entire time. Your nervous system has been sending you signals all along. The tight shoulders after back-to-back meetings. The way your eyes lose focus around 3 p.m. The sudden sugar craving when you're stress working through lunch. That's not a weakness. That's intelligence. That's your body running diagnostics and reporting its findings. But we've been trained to ignore the readouts, to override the warnings, to treat our bodies like outdated hardware that just needs to be pushed harder. I spent years doing exactly that. Drinking coffee to wake up, drinking wine to wind down, using sugar for quick energy, then crashing and wondering why my productivity looked like a heart rate monitor during a panic attack. Here's what changed everything for me. I started treating my body like a business partner instead of an employee. Partners communicate, partners negotiate, partners respect each other's needs because they understand they're in this together. When my body said it needed movement, I stopped calling that a distraction from work. I realized movement was part of the work. Some of my best strategic insights came during walks, not during meetings. Your brain processes differently when your body is in motion. Studies show walking increases creative output by an average of 60%. 60%. That's not a rounding error. That's a competitive advantage. When my body said it needed fuel, I stopped grabbing whatever was fastest. I started asking, what do my next 3 hours need from this meal? If I have deep work coming, I need sustained energy protein, complex carbs, healthy fats. If I have creative work, sometimes I actually work better, slightly hungry. The Romans knew this. They called it the hunger of the mind. Light fasting can sharpen certain types of thinking. When my body said it needed rest, I stopped treating sleep like a luxury I'd earn after success. I realized sleep was the factory where success gets manufactured. Everything you learn today gets consolidated during sleep. Every muscle you challenged gets repaired during sleep. Every emotion you processed gets integrated during sleep. Without proper sleep, you're essentially trying to build a house while someone keeps stealing the bricks. You can work as hard as you want during the day, but if you're not sleeping enough at night, your brain is literally unable to store what you've learned. There's a reason why students who pull all-nighters before exams consistently perform worse than those who study less but sleep more. It's not a coincidence, it's neuroscience. Your brain needs those deep sleep cycles to move information from short-term storage into long-term memory. It needs REM sleep to make connections between new information and existing knowledge. It needs those quiet hours to prune away the unnecessary and strengthen the essential. When you sacrifice sleep, you're not just tired, the next day you're actively sabotaging weeks or months of effort. I learned this the hard way in my 30s. I'd work 16-hour days, convinced I was maximizing productivity. I'd answer emails at midnight, review documents at 5 in the morning, and survive on 5 hours of broken sleep. And you know what? My output was garbage. I'd make the same mistakes twice. I'd forget conversations I'd had the day before. I'd read the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing it. I wasn't being productive. I was performing what I now call zombie work, going through the motions without actual cognitive engagement. The shift happened when I committed to 8 hours, non-negotiable, sacred, and within 2 weeks, everything changed. My thinking became clearer. My memory sharpened. Problems that had seemed insurmountable suddenly had obvious solutions. I wasn't working longer hours, but I was accomplishing more in less time because my brain was actually functioning properly. Here's what nobody tells you about sleep. It's not passive recovery. Your brain during sleep is extraordinarily active, just in different ways. It's replaying the day's experiences, strengthening important neural pathways, and clearing out metabolic waste through the glymphatic system. It's literally cleaning house, taking out the trash, and reorganizing the furniture. When you don't give it enough time to do this work, you're living in an increasingly cluttered mental space. I learned this the hard way during those years in France, serving as an ambassador. The social obligations, the late-night salons, the diplomatic dinners that stretched past midnight. I thought I was being productive, making connections, advancing American interests. And I was, to a point. But I was also running myself into the ground. My gout flared up. My mind felt foggy. I'd sit down to write a crucial letter and find myself staring at blank paper, the words refusing to come. The French aristocrats I dealt with, many of them were the same way. They'd stay up until 3 in the morning, sleep until noon, then wonder why they felt perpetually exhausted despite getting 9 hours. It wasn't the quantity, it was the quality and the consistency. Their bodies never knew what time it was supposed to do what. Here's what nobody tells you about sleep. It's not just about recovery. It's about integration. Every conversation you have, every book you read, every problem you wrestle with, your brain needs time to process it, to connect it with what you already know, to build new insights from existing knowledge. This happens during sleep, particularly during REM sleep. When you shortchange yourself, you're not just tired, you're literally preventing yourself from becoming smarter, from making the connections that lead to breakthroughs. Think about the last time you had a problem you couldn't solve, then woke up the next morning with sudden clarity. That wasn't magic. That was your sleeping brain doing what it does best, working through problems without the interference of your conscious mind getting in the way. The question isn't whether you can afford to sleep 8 hours. It's whether you can afford not to. Here's something most people don't realize. Sleep debt compounds like financial debt. And just like credit card debt, the interest rate is brutal. You can't skip sleep Monday through Friday and think you'll magically catch up on the weekend. Your body doesn't work on a weekly accounting system. Every hour of sleep you miss creates a deficit that accumulates, and the cognitive and physical consequences multiply over time. I've watched brilliant entrepreneurs destroy years of hard work because they thought they could outsmart basic biology. They'd brag about their 4-hour nights like it was a competitive advantage. Then I'd watch their decision-making deteriorate, their relationships crumble, and their health collapse, often in that exact order. One founder I knew was convinced his productivity system was revolutionary. He'd sleep 4 hours, take strategic naps, and fuel himself with coffee and supplements. For about 18 months, He seemed invincible. His company was growing. His energy appeared limitless. Then the cracks started showing. First, small things, forgetting meetings, snapping at his team. Then bigger issues, a major strategic mistake that cost his company a critical partnership. By month 20, he was diagnosed with early-stage hypertension, and his doctor delivered an ultimatum: change your sleep habits, or prepare for serious cardiovascular problems. Here's what happened to his so-called productivity. Those extra hours he gained by sleeping less, they were actually producing a negative value. The mistakes he made while sleep-deprived cost his company more time and money than if he'd simply slept properly and worked fewer, more focused hours. The mathematics of sleep debt is unforgiving. One study tracked cognitive performance in people sleeping 6 hours per night. After just 2 weeks, their impairment matched someone who'd been awake for 48 hours straight. But here's the terrifying part: they didn't feel impaired. They'd adapted to their diminished capacity and genuinely believed they were functioning normally. This is the insidious nature of chronic sleep deprivation. You become a worse version of yourself, so gradually that you don't even notice the decline. I remember reading about a study where they asked sleep-deprived people to rate their own cognitive performance. The subjects consistently rated themselves as functioning far better than they actually were. It's like being drunk and insisting you're perfectly capable of driving. The very faculty you need to assess your impairment is itself impaired. This delusion extends into every corner of modern life. How many business leaders are making million-dollar decisions on 5 hours of sleep, convinced they're at their sharpest? How many doctors are treating patients after a 30-hour shift, believing their judgment is sound? How many parents are navigating complex family dynamics while running on fumes, wondering why everything feels so hard? The corporate world has fetishized this dysfunction. We celebrate the CEO who sleeps 4 hours a night. We admire the entrepreneur grinding through the night. We've created an entire mythology around sleep deprivation as a mark of dedication, commitment, and ambition. It's one of the most dangerous lies our culture tells itself. Because here's what actually happens when leaders operate chronically sleep-deprived. Their decision-making deteriorates. They become more rigid in their thinking, less open to new information. They're more likely to make impulsive choices, to double down on failing strategies rather than adapt. Their emotional regulation suffers, making them more reactive, more prone to outbursts, and less capable of the measured response that leadership requires. And these effects cascade through entire organizations. A sleep-deprived executive creates a culture where everyone feels pressure to sacrifice sleep. The dysfunction becomes institutional, embedded in the very DNA of how the organization operates. I saw this pattern play out in my own career. There were periods when I convinced myself that sleep was negotiable, that I could sustain high performance on minimal rest. Looking back, I can see clearly that those were my least effective periods. I was busier, certainly. More frantic, absolutely. But my actual output, the quality of my thinking, my ability to solve complex problems all diminished. The tragedy is that we can't see this while we're in it. Sleep deprivation steals our ability to recognize what it's stolen. I think about this often when I reflect on my own journey. There were periods in my life, particularly during my years as a printer and publisher, when I convinced myself that sleeping less gave me an edge. I'd rise at 4 in the morning, work until midnight, and feel a strange pride in my exhaustion. I thought I was outworking everyone, that this was the secret to success. But looking back now with clearer eyes, I can see the truth I couldn't see then. Those weren't my most productive years. They were my most busy times years, certainly. But busy and productive are entirely different things. I made more mistakes during those sleep-deprived periods. I had more conflicts with business partners. I overlooked opportunities that should have been obvious. My relationships suffered because I was irritable and impatient. The real breakthroughs in my life, the inventions, the diplomatic successes, the insights that actually mattered, came during periods when I respected my body's need for rest. The lightning rod wasn't conceived in a fog of exhaustion. The principles that guided the Constitutional Convention weren't negotiated by a man running on empty. Clear thinking requires a clear mind, and a clear mind requires adequate sleep. Yet, we live in a culture that treats sleep as negotiable, as something for the weak or uncommitted. We celebrate the entrepreneur who sleeps 4 hours a night. We admire the student who pulls all-nighters. We promote the employee who responds to emails at 3 in the morning. We've created a society that rewards self-destruction and calls it dedication. And the cost? It's written in our collective health, the rising rates of anxiety and depression, the epidemic of chronic disease, the shortened lifespans, the quality of life that diminishes year by year, even as our technological capabilities expand. We're building a future with exhausted architects, and we wonder why the foundation keeps cracking. The science is clear now in ways it wasn't in my time. Sleep isn't just rest, it's when your brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, clears out cellular waste, and strengthens your immune system. It's when your body repairs itself at the deepest level. Skipping sleep isn't just uncomfortable, it's biochemically catastrophic. I learned this the hard way during my printing days. I used to burn the candle at both ends literally. Up at 4 a.m. to work the press, stay up until midnight writing Poor Richard's Almanac. I thought I was being productive. I was actually destroying myself. My thinking became fuzzy. My temper shortened. I'd make mistakes on print runs that cost me money and reputation. 1 week of proper sleep, 7, 8 hours a night, and it was like someone had cleaned the windows of my mind. Suddenly, I could see clearly again. Your ancestors understood this instinctively. They rose with the sun, rested with the dark. Their bodies synchronized with natural rhythms that had governed human biology for millennia. Then Edison invented the light bulb, and we declared war on darkness itself. Now you're bathed in blue light at midnight, scrolling through an endless feed of other people's curated lives, wondering why you feel anxious and can't fall asleep. The solution isn't complicated. It's just inconvenient in a world that's designed to keep you awake and spending money. Set a bedtime, not a try-to-sleep time, an actual bedtime, as you had as a child. Protect it fiercely. An hour before, dim the lights. Put away the glowing rectangles. Read something physical. Journal. Talk to a human you love. Let your nervous system downshift gradually. Keep your bedroom cool around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body temperature needs to drop to initiate sleep. Make it dark, truly dark. Not I can see the street light through my curtains dark. Get blackout curtains or a sleep mask. And for God's sake, stop treating your bed like an office, a dining room, and an entertainment center. Your brain needs to associate that space with sleep and intimacy, nothing else. When you work from bed, you're training your mind to be alert in the one place it should relax. The research is unequivocal. Adults need 7 to 9 hours. Not I'll catch up on the weekend. Not I'll sleep when I'm dead. Consistent, adequate sleep every single night. It's not negotiable if you want your brain and body to function. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Benjamin, I've tried everything. I lie awake for hours. My mind races. I've counted so many sheep I could start a farm. I hear you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most sleep problems aren't actually sleep problems. They're anxiety problems wearing sleep's clothing. Your racing mind at 2 a.m.? That's not insomnia. That's unprocessed stress from a day spent in constant reaction mode. Your inability to fall asleep? Often, that's cortisol that should have tapered off hours ago but didn't because you were answering emails until you collapsed into bed. We've created a culture where we treat sleep like an off switch. Work, 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 click, sleep. But your brain doesn't work that way. It needs a runway, a transition, a signal that says, the performance is over. It's safe to rest now. This is where the concept of a wind-down routine becomes not just helpful, but essential. And I'm not talking about some elaborate spa ritual. I'm talking about giving your nervous system permission to shift gears. The research on this is fascinating. Your body runs on something called the circadian rhythm, an internal clock that responds to light, temperature, and behavioral cues. When you honor this rhythm, sleep comes naturally. When you fight it, you suffer. Here's what actually works. Dim the lights in your home an hour before bed. Not just turning off the overhead, actually creating an environment that signals evening. Your brain interprets bright light as daytime, stay alert. Dim light says, wind down. Lower the temperature. Your core body temperature naturally drops as you prepare for sleep. A cool room around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit facilitates this process. This is why you sleep better with a cold room and warm blankets than in a hot, stuffy bedroom. And please, for the love of all that is holy, step away from the screens. I know you've heard this before. I know you think you're the exception. You're not. The blue light from phones, tablets, and computers suppresses melatonin production, the hormone that makes you sleepy. Every minute you spend scrolling before bed is actively working against your ability to sleep. I learned this through candles and natural light. When the sun set, my world dimmed. My body understood what time it was. Now, you carry artificial daylight in your pocket, telling your brain it's noon at midnight. Here's what I recommend. 1 hour before bed, all screens go dark. Every single one. Your phone, your laptop, your television, they all emit this sleep-destroying light. But Franklin, you protest. I need to wind down. Then read a physical book. Write in a journal. Have a conversation with someone you love. These activities actually prepare your mind for rest, rather than revving it up with notifications and endless content. If you absolutely must use devices in the evening, at a minimum, enable night mode or wear blue light-blocking glasses. But honestly, just put them away. The emails will wait. The social media drama will still be there tomorrow. Your sleep is more valuable than any of that noise. The second habit, establish a consistent sleep schedule. Your body craves rhythm and predictability. In my era, this happened naturally. We rose with the sun, retired when darkness fell. You must create this rhythm deliberately. Go to bed at the same time every night. Wake at the same time every morning. Yes, even on weekends. But weekends are for sleeping in. You cry, and that's precisely why you feel like garbage on Monday mornings. You've given yourself jet lag without ever boarding a ship or plane. In your case, your body operates on something called a circadian rhythm. It's an internal clock that regulates when you feel alert and when you feel sleepy. Every time you drastically change your sleep schedule, you're essentially resetting this clock, forcing your body to recalibrate. It's exhausting, and it undermines every other sleep improvement you attempt. When I maintained my schedule, I could wake before dawn without effort. My body knew, it anticipated. The consistency itself became energizing. You can experience this same phenomenon, but only if you respect the pattern long enough for it to take hold. I learned that the pattern mattered more than the individual day. Miss one sunrise? The system didn't collapse. But miss the pattern, miss the rhythm itself, and everything unraveled. The secret was in understanding the difference between a deviation and a disruption. A deviation is momentary. You sleep through your writing hour because you're ill. You skip the evening walk because of a storm. The pattern bends but doesn't break. A disruption is different. That's when you tell yourself the exception is now the rule. When one missed day becomes permission for 3, then 7, then infinity. I watched this destroy promising minds. Young men who would write brilliantly for weeks, then vanish into chaos for months. They possessed talent but no system to protect it. They confused flexibility with surrender. True discipline isn't rigidity, it's the ability to return to a pattern after necessary deviation. The craftsman understood this instinctively. A carpenter doesn't abandon his tools because he takes Sunday rest. The tools wait. The shop remains organized. Monday morning, he returns to the same bench, the same routine, the same excellence. The interruption was planned, bounded, and respected. It served the pattern rather than destroying it. You face this choice constantly now. Your world offers endless justification for disruption, disguised as flexibility. Listen to your body. Don't be so rigid. Life happens. All true. Sometimes. But mostly, these are sophisticated narratives your resistance writes to reclaim territory. The question isn't whether to ever deviate, of course you will. The question is whether you treat deviation as a dangerous exception, requiring immediate correction, or as a gateway back to chaos. One strengthens the pattern through its careful handling. The other dissolves everything you've built. I made a practice of marking my returns as deliberately as my departures. When illness kept me from writing, I noted the day I resumed it, with a special ceremony. Fresh paper, clean workspace, renewed intention. The return wasn't casual, it was a reaffirmation of identity. I am the person who writes, and I have returned to who I am. This ritual of return might be your most important discipline, not the maintenance of the pattern but its restoration when broken. The craftsman who drops his chisel does not abandon his craft, he picks it up again. This is not failure. This is the nature of making things. I watched shipbuilders in Philadelphia lose entire days to storm damage, only to return the next morning to wet wood and tangled rope. They did not call themselves broken. They called themselves builders, and continued building. Your writing practice will be interrupted. Life does not honor our intentions with compliance. Children fall ill, roofs leak. Disasters, both personal and collective, arrive without invitation. The question is never whether an interruption will come. The question is what you call yourself when it does. Most abandon their practice because they confuse interruption with ending. They miss 3 days and declare themselves someone who used to write. This is the actual failure, not the missing days, but the story you tell about them. I have missed months of correspondence. What mattered was that I did not say, I am no longer a correspondent. I said, I am a correspondent who is currently behind, and the distinction preserved everything. Build return into your identity, not just consistency. Do not aspire to be someone who never breaks the pattern. Aspire to be someone who always rebuilds it. This is more honest to the human condition and far more durable across decades. The pattern you create should have explicit instructions for restoration. I kept a simple document. When I have been away from my writing, I return by writing 1 paragraph about anything at all. I do not judge it. I do not require brilliance. I require presence. This removed the barrier that grows higher with each absent day, the feeling that I must write something worthy of the gap. You are worthy of return without justification. You need not earn your way back with excellence. You return because the practice is yours, and you are claiming it again. Write badly if you must. Write briefly. Write resentfully. But write. And in writing, you perform the only magic that matters. You become again the person who writes. The restoration is often more important than the original establishment. Anyone can begin when enthusiasm is high. Only those who understand themselves build the mechanisms for beginning again, and again, and again. This brings us to the final consideration, the one that determines whether your practice becomes your legacy or merely your history. Asterisk, asterisk. The longevity question, building something that outlives you. Asterisk, asterisk. I've watched men pour their entire souls into ventures that collapsed the moment they stepped away. Not because the work wasn't good, not because the market disappeared, but because they'd built everything around themselves, their personality, their connections, their presence. They were the indispensable center, the irreplaceable core. And the moment they weren't there, the whole thing fell apart like a house of cards. This is the brutal truth about entrepreneurship that nobody wants to face. Most of what we build won't survive us. Most businesses die with their founders. Most innovations fade into footnotes. Most of life's work becomes someone else's forgotten history. But it doesn't have to be that way. I've seen the alternative. I've watched certain individuals build structures that grew stronger in their absence, systems that functioned better without constant intervention, legacies that expanded long after their creators moved on. The difference wasn't luck. It was an intentional design from the very beginning. You see, there are 2 fundamentally different approaches to building anything. The first is to make yourself indispensable to be the genius everyone needs, the bottleneck every decision flows through, the irreplaceable linchpin holding everything together. It feels powerful, it feeds the ego, and it guarantees that everything you build has an expiration date. The second approach is harder. It requires humility. It means building systems instead of dependencies, developing others instead of hoarding knowledge, and creating frameworks that work without your constant oversight. It means making yourself indispensable. I learned this the hard way with my printing business. In the early years, I was everything: typesetter, pressman, editor, delivery boy. I took pride in being essential, in being the only one who could do things right. And I was trapped, utterly trapped. Every day I wasn't there, the business suffered. Every illness meant lost revenue. Every opportunity elsewhere meant staying chained to the press. The turning point came when I started documenting everything. Not just what I did, but why I did it. Not just the processes, but the principles behind them. I began training others not to follow my instructions, but to think through problems the way I would. I created checklists, standard DS, and quality controls that didn't require my judgment. Slowly, painfully, I made myself unnecessary. And that's when everything changed. The business didn't just survive without me, it thrived. My partners improved the systems I'd created. Apprentices found efficiencies I'd missed. The operation grew beyond what I could have managed alone because it no longer depended on my limitations. Perhaps the greatest revelation came when I stopped measuring success by my personal output and started measuring it by systemic impact. How many lives improved because of what we built together? How many communities had access to information through our network of print shops? How many young minds were developed through the educational institutions we established? These questions shifted everything. Suddenly, retirement wasn't abandonment, it was amplification. By stepping back from day-to-day operations at 42, I freed myself to work on challenges that my daily routine had prevented me from addressing. The lightning experiments, the diplomatic missions, the constitutional contributions, none of these would have been possible if I'd remained chained to the printing press. I watched this principle transform the Junto Club as well. We'd started as 12 leather apron men meeting weekly to improve ourselves and our community. But the real magic happened when we stopped hoarding our little society and started replicating it. Subscription libraries spread throughout the colonies, each one following our model but adapting to local needs. Fire companies multiplied. The concept of mutual improvement societies took root everywhere. Each new iteration taught us something. The libraries revealed which organizational structures worked best. The fire companies showed us how to maintain standards across independent units. Every replication was both a tribute to the original idea and an enhancement of it. This is what I mean when I say the highest form of productivity isn't doing more, it's enabling more. It's building something that continues producing value when you're asleep, when you're working on something else, when you've moved to a different city, or retired from business entirely. The wealthy planters I'd envied in my youth suddenly looked different through this lens. Yes, they had money, but their fortunes required constant personal management. Their productivity stopped when they stopped working. They were trapped in golden cages of their own making. Meanwhile, I'd built something genuinely liberating. Systems that worked without me, partnerships that thrived on mutual benefit, networks that grew stronger as they expanded, knowledge freely shared that returned to me, multiplied through others' innovations. I watched competitors become collaborators. Rival printers became partners in ambitious projects neither could complete alone. I proposed joint ventures that seemed impossible, shared equipment, divided territories, coordinated pricing that prevented ruinous competition. My competitors thought me mad at first. Why would I share my advantages? Why would I help potential rivals establish themselves? Because I understood what they didn't, that the pie could grow. A thriving printing industry elevated all of those 10 successful printers, creating more opportunities than one monopolist ever could. I helped young printers establish themselves in other colonies, provided them with equipment, connected them with suppliers, and taught them the craft's intricacies. My only conditions were honesty and quality work. These weren't acts of charity. They were investments that paid extraordinary returns. Each printer I helped became a node in an expanding network. They sent me business they couldn't handle. They shared innovations they discovered. They became my advocates in communities I could never reach alone. When I needed printing done in distant colonies, I had trusted partners. When I sought information about distant markets, I had reliable sources. When I required political support, I had grateful allies. The network grew organically, strengthening with each new connection. Information flowed freely, market conditions, technical innovations, political developments. Opportunities multiplied as the network expanded. I discovered something profound: genuine abundance. Not the false abundance of hoarded wealth, but real prosperity that grows when shared. Every skill I taught returned to me enhanced. Every opportunity I created for others generated new possibilities I hadn't imagined. Every connection I facilitated strengthened my position within the web of relationships. This wasn't networking as calculation. It was relationship building as philosophy. I genuinely wanted others to succeed, and that sincerity made all the difference. People sense authenticity. They recognize when generosity is manipulation versus genuine goodwill. My assistance came without strings because I trusted the natural reciprocity of human relationships, and that trust was validated repeatedly. The printer I established in Charleston sent me business for decades. The craftsman I mentored introduced me to influential contacts who changed my trajectory. The competitor I helped during a difficult period became my most loyal advocate. Your reputation isn't built in moments of triumph, it's forged in how you conduct yourself when no one's watching, when helping offers you no immediate benefit, when doing the right thing costs you something real. I learned this truth most powerfully through correspondence. Letters were the lifeblood of an enlightened society in my era, and I treated every piece of correspondence, whether from a prominent scientist or an obscure tradesman, with equal seriousness and respect. I answered questions thoroughly. I shared knowledge freely. I acknowledged contributions generously, even when they came from unexpected sources. This practice seemed inefficient to those focused solely on immediate returns. Why spend hours crafting thoughtful responses to strangers? Why share hard-won insights with competitors? Why credit others when you could claim the discovery yourself? The answer revealed itself over decades. Those letters created a network of goodwill that spanned continents and transcended social boundaries. The unknown tradesman I helped became a wealthy merchant who facilitated crucial business connections. The amateur scientist I encouraged made discoveries that advanced our collective understanding. The rival I credited publicly became a collaborator who helped me navigate complex political waters. Your network isn't just the people you know, it's the people who trust you, who believe in your integrity, who carry your reputation into rooms you'll never enter. And that trust is built through countless small acts of generosity, consistency, and genuine care for others' success. I made it a practice to celebrate others' achievements publicly and enthusiastically. When a fellow printer developed an innovative technique, I wrote about it. When a scientist made a discovery, I promoted their work. When a young entrepreneur succeeded, I shared their story. This wasn't selfless altruism, it was enlightened self-interest. By elevating others, I became known as someone who made things happen, who opened doors, who created opportunities. People gravitate toward those who make them feel larger, not smaller. Build others up, and they'll naturally want to include you in their rising fortune. The currency of connection isn't what you know, it's what you help others discover about themselves. When you walk into a room, don't think about how to be impressive. Think about how to be interested. Ask questions that matter. Listen with the kind of attention that makes people feel truly heard, perhaps for the first time in weeks. I made it a practice to remember details about people, not just their names, but their aspirations, their children's names, their struggles with that printing contract, or their hope to expand their shop. When I saw them again months later and asked how young Thomas was doing with his apprenticeship, their faces lit up. You remembered. You cared. That simple act created bonds stronger than any business transaction. Here's what nobody tells you about influence. It compounds like interest. Every person you help becomes a node in an expanding network. They help others, who help others, and suddenly you're connected to opportunities you never directly pursued. I didn't seek the postmaster position, it found me because I'd helped enough people that my reputation preceded me into rooms I'd never entered. But, and this is crucial, you cannot fake genuine interest in others. People sense insincerity like animals sense fear. If you're connecting with people merely to extract value from them, they'll feel it in their bones, and they'll withdraw. You must cultivate actual curiosity about human nature, about what drives people, about what makes each person uniquely themselves. I found endless fascination in the baker's thoughts on fermentation, the sailor's observations about weather patterns, and the widow's insights on raising children alone. Every person carries wisdom born from their particular vantage point in life. When you approach conversations with this mindset, you're never bored, and people sense that you see something valuable in them that others might have overlooked. The paradox of connection is this: the less you need from people, the more they want to give you. When you're secure in yourself, when you've built genuine skills and character, you approach relationships from abundance rather than scarcity. You're not desperately grasping for favor, you're generously offering your attention and support. And that energy shift? People feel it. They sense when you're coming from a place of strength rather than need. It's magnetic. I remember a young woman who came to Philadelphia seeking opportunity. She had no connections, no letters of introduction, nothing but her skills as a seamstress and her reputation for honest work. She didn't grovel for patronage. She simply delivered exceptional quality, met every deadline, and treated everyone with the same courtesy, whether they were wealthy merchants or fellow tradespeople. Within 2 years, she had more commissions than she could handle. Not because she had chased influence, but because her character had attracted it. This is the power of reverse networking, the influence that comes not from what you take, but from what you give and who you become. So let me ask you directly, what are you building when no one is watching? What skills are you developing in the quiet hours? What kind of character are you forging in the small, unseen moments? Because here's what I've learned across decades of public life. Your private habits become your public reputation. The discipline you exercise alone becomes the reliability that others depend on. The integrity you practice in small matters becomes the trustworthiness that attracts great opportunities. You don't need to be perfect. Lord knows I wasn't. but you do need to be growing. You need to be someone who keeps your word, who improves your craft, and who treats people with decency, regardless of their status. Do that consistently, and the network builds itself. Think of it like compound interest, another principle I've always cherished. Small deposits of goodwill, consistent investments in your skills, regular acts of generosity without expectation of return. They seem insignificant day by day, but over months and years, they accumulate into something remarkable. They create a reputation that opens doors you didn't even know existed. And when those doors open, you'll be ready. Not because you schemed your way to the threshold, but because you built yourself into someone worthy of walking through. Let me tell you what I observed in the most successful men and women I have ever encountered. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for the perfect moment. They didn't wait until they felt ready. They simply began. I started my printing business at 17 with borrowed equipment and more confidence than capital. Was I ready? Absolutely not. Did I know everything I needed to know? Not even close. But I understood something crucial. Readiness is built through action, not contemplation. You see, there's a particular trap that ensnares people of intelligence. They study, they prepare, they plan, they research every possible outcome, every potential obstacle, every risk factor. And while they're gathering information, someone less educated but more decisive is already in the market, making mistakes, learning, adjusting, and ultimately succeeding. I'm not advocating for recklessness. Preparation matters, but there comes a point where additional preparation becomes procrastination wearing a disguise of prudence. The people who changed my city, my era, my world, they were doers. They launched imperfect newspapers. They opened businesses before every detail was settled. They proposed initiatives before every question was answered. They understood that motion creates momentum, and momentum creates opportunities that standing still never reveals. When I proposed the library company, I didn't have a building. When I started the fire company, I didn't have equipment. When I launched experiments with electricity, I didn't have proper instruments. I had ideas and the willingness to act on them before conditions were ideal. This is what separates those who dream from those who build. Dreams require nothing but imagination. Building requires you to begin with whatever you have, wherever you are, however inadequate it feels. And here's what happens when you start before you're ready. You discover resources you didn't know existed. People emerge to help. Solutions appear. You develop capabilities that no amount of preparation could have taught you. The universe, it seems, rewards motion. But you must take that first step. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel more prepared. Now. Look around you. Right now. Someone is taking action while you're planning to plan. Someone is publishing while you're perfecting. Someone is earning while you're learning for the sake of learning. Someone is building an audience while you're waiting for the perfect moment. And you know what? Their first attempt isn't perfect. It's messy. It's flawed. But it's time's real asterisk. And that reality, that tangible existence in the world, gives them something infinitely more valuable than your perfect plan sitting in your notebook. It gives them feedback, data, momentum, the magnetic force that attracts opportunities you can't even imagine yet. I started my first printing business with borrowed equipment and more ambition than expertise. Poor Richard's Almanac? The first edition was a gamble that could have bankrupted me. But I didn't wait until I was certain. I moved when the opportunity presented itself, when the iron was hot, when the timing was imperfect but possible. Every single day you wait is a day someone else is getting ahead. Not because they're smarter than you, not because they're more talented, but because they're willing to be imperfect in public while you're striving for perfection in private. And here's what nobody tells you about that perfection you're chasing. It doesn't exist. It's a horizon that retreats as you approach it. You'll never feel completely ready. You'll never have all the answers. You'll never eliminate all the risks. So what are you actually waiting for? Permission? You're not going to get it. Certainty? It doesn't exist. The perfect moment? You're living in it right now, and you're letting it slip through your fingers while you wait for a better one that's never coming. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing. Willing to be uncomfortable. Willing to be imperfect. Willing to start before you feel prepared. Because here's the truth that separates those who achieve extraordinary things from those who simply dream about them. Extraordinary people don't wait for permission, perfect conditions, or complete preparation. They start anyway. They figure it out along the way. They build the plane as they're falling. As the saying goes, you know, you have ideas. You have something valuable to offer the world. The only question remaining is whether you'll let fear of imperfection keep that value locked inside you, or whether you'll have the courage to share it, messy and incomplete as it may be. Because here's what I learned in my 70 years building businesses, inventing devices, shaping documents that would outlive me by centuries. The work that changes the world is rarely the work that started perfect. It's the work that made it possible. When I began publishing Poor Richard's Almanac, I didn't wait until I had the world's most profound wisdom. I printed what I knew, sold it for pennies, and improved it year after year. Some of those early editions, frankly embarrassing when I look back, but they sold. They reached people. They started conversations that led to better ideas, which led to the versions people still quote today. The difference between the person whose ideas change the world and the person whose ideas die with them isn't talent. It's not genius. It's not even an opportunity. It's simply this: one of them decided their imperfect work was worth sharing, and the other decided it wasn't. You get to make that choice right now, today, this moment. You can spend another year, another decade, perfecting something in private, polishing it until it gleams, protecting it from criticism by never exposing it to the light. And you know what happens? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The world continues unchanged. The people who needed what you had to offer continue searching for it, never knowing you had the answer locked away, deemed not quite ready. Or you can do what every person who's ever built something meaningful has done. You can share your imperfect work and let it evolve in the real world. Because that's where real improvement happens. Not in the isolation of your mind, where you imagine every possible criticism, but in the marketplace of ideas, where real people with real problems respond to what you've made. They'll tell you what works. They'll show you what doesn't. They'll ask questions you never considered, revealing angles you couldn't see alone. And yes, some will criticize, some will mock, some will misunderstand entirely, and you'll survive all of it. More than survive, you'll grow from it. You'll take that feedback, that experience, that real-world data you could never have generated alone, and you'll make version 2, then version 3, then the version that actually changes things. But none of that happens until you release version 1.